The Vikings were a barbaric force that took over most of Europe in the late 6th century and continued to invade countries for the next 200 years. They brutally attacked villages and took everything. As the empire grew stronger, these Viking forces converted to Christianity, and that was the end of the Viking reign. Who were the Vikings? In the 7th century, the Vikings were raiding all of Europe. They had weakened the empire and were a very strong force invading from the north. The Vikings put a constant pressure on the empire because they were getting gradually closer and were very deadly and could attack at any time. They attacked seaside towns and villages in long, narrow boats, and they made their way onto land by rivers. These Norsemen, as they were called, were from Scandinavia and were very similar to pirates. They lived on the water and looted towns, and when they left, they took everything. They were also not Christian. They came from a foreign land and were not very civilized by European standards. These Vikings were pagan. How did they rise? The Vikings rose to power by conducting very quick and powerful raids. As time passed, they continued with these raids and started spreading and inhabiting more regions like Norway, Scotland, Ireland, and even England. These Vikings, however, were not out to get land, but instead wanted riches. This is why they attacked Europe. They were growing richer. In 793, the Vikings attacked a monastery off the coast of England. This marks the beginning of the Viking Age. They did not destroy this monastery they attacked, but it shook the Europeans and was very disturbing and disrespectful to their religion. They continued to attack more and more monasteries. What did they do? They had a hit-and-run style when doing their raids, which meant they would attack, and once they took all they could, they would load it onto their boats and leave. These raids lasted several decades. They didn't only attack Europe. They also spread to other regions of the world, like Seville, which was controlled by Arabs. These attacks lasted many decades, and people were very scared of the Vikings. They waged war and inhabited British islands. They formed settlements there and left their permanent mark on the culture and language. They formed new languages, which was a mix of Old English and Old Norse.
What was their connection to Christianity? What were their first interactions like? As we have learned from our studies, much of what was once the Roman Empire was ruled by feudal lords in the 7th century. However, as Cuan has said, in the West the Vikings were causing havoc. They raided and murdered many under the belief of pagan gods. Many of these raids occurred on Christian monasteries and churches. This was not religiously provoked. The main reason the Vikings attacked these places is because they were often wealthy and full of precious metals like gold, but most importantly, they were poorly defended. These were the first contacts made between Christianity and the Vikings. Later, Vikings began to settle on the land inhabited by the Christians. This caused some Vikings to take up the belief in Christianity. Many Vikings practiced Christianity and paganism. Once they had fully settled, Anglo-Saxon missionaries came to convert the Vikings. This could have been a major problem for Christianity. However, places like Denmark and Norway had already been well established with Christian religion. Why did they practice two religions? As I mentioned, many Vikings didn't fully convert to Christianity. This is because the Vikings had established a large trading route through Europe. This was very important to them, but they could not trade with Christians. This was because the Christians would not trade with pagans. This caused many Vikings to convert to Christianity so they could trade with a larger amount of people than before. How did the Vikings convert? Emperor Charlemagne played a large role in converting the Vikings from Christianity. This is because Charlemagne ordered that everyone in mainland Europe, including the Anglo-Saxons, had to convert to Christianity or they would be killed. Although many of these people were not Vikings, when the Vikings did raid and settled in these places, they would convert willingly. Many of these Vikings would marry Christian women. When these couples had children, they would often be raised as Christians. These children would go on to become Vikings themselves, but believe in the Christian faith. As the years went on, Viking kings began forcing their armies, as well as Norse peoples, to convert to Christianity.
Conclusions and implications. The Vikings had very powerful and strong armies which conquered much of Europe. In the beginning, they worshipped pagan gods, and their culture was very different from Christianity. However, as they settled deeper into Europe and took over more land, they began to convert. At first, they were only half Christian, but as time went on, they would soon become fully Christian. As the empire grew stronger and stronger, more Vikings converted. The tides had now turned, and Christian population grew even more.